Hello again and welcome to Shardcast. My name is Aaron Froats and I will be your host as we bring you continuing coverage of the second Hex Streamers Tournament brought to you by Hexcasters and our friends over at HexTCG Pro. Today we'll be covering the matchup of Day 3 in the North American West Coast pool between Funktion and Joltenergy. This will be a matchup of Funktion dealing his Blood Diamond deck, as we saw back on Day 1, versus Joltenergy, who's playing a Diamond Wild deck, and it looks like we're going to go ahead and go to the coin flip already. So let me go ahead and get you out there. This will be a Day 3 matchup. Funktion has swept his opponents thus far as we go to the coin flip, and it looks like Joltenergy won the coin flip as he takes a peek at his first 7 cards here. We are actually looking at this game from Funktion's point of view here, so we'll be able to view Funktion's hand throughout the course of the games today. It looks like Joltenergy kept his starting hand of 7, and Funktion will do the same as he has 2 Blood Shards, a Diamond Shard, Stone Skin, Life Siphon, Giant Corpse Fly, and Living Totem, so he has a pretty good curve-out hand right there. First play by Joltenergy on turn 1 is going to be a Wild Shard, and it looks like he's going to pass turn over, nothing to play on turn 1. Funktion draws a Shards of Fate, and let's see if he plays that. It's, like I said, it's pretty much a safe play to play that in turn 1, unless you have something to play immediately. And this with the Stone Skin being a quick action, a counter removal, a counter spell, if you will. Not really something he wants to play on turn 1 anyway. So he goes and gets a Diamond Threshold, and passes turn back over. Shards of Fate again gives you 1 permanent resource, not a temporary resource to use this turn. Joltenergy starts turn 2, and he drops a Diamond resource and puts out Shield Trainer. Shield Trainer is a 2/2 troop for 2 resources in 1 Diamond Threshold. He has the Inspire keyword of Steadfast, so anything that comes into play on his side of the board, any troop that costs 2 or more will get the keyword of Steadfast. And he will pass that turn back over to Funktion, who draws a Blood Shard. See if he goes ahead and gets that Living Totem out on his next turn. He does. Living Totem is a 2/2 troop for 2 resources, and you can pay 3 resources to give him a whole slew of keywords, as well as a +1/+1 permanent pump. So we'll see Living Totem to be an active card for Funktion, and maybe gain a few abilities and grow a little bit bigger there. He's going to pass it on over to Joltenergy, who starts his 3rd turn. I'm guessing Jolt's going to try to get a couple of bigger wild creatures out to give the Steadfast ability to and kind of halt the board state. Here comes Protectorate Clergyman, who will get that Steadfast keyword from Shield Trainers that costs 3. He's a 3/2 troop with Inspire keyword of... the Inspire ability of +1/+1. Joltenergy swings for 2 damage here. Funktion chooses not to block and sacrifice the Living Totem, and takes 2 damage on the chin, going down to 18 health. That will be the end of Jolt's turn as he's out of resources. Funktion's 3rd turn here is going to be another Giant Corpse Fly. With Jolt playing Wild, we may see a couple of those come out. Giant Corpse Fly comes out as a 2/1 creature with Flight that forces the opponent to discard a card from their hand. We'll see if Funktion decides to do that or decides to pump up this Living Totem. I guess it probably depends on what Jolt does here. I wouldn't think Jolt's going to block because Funktion can give the keyword of Swift Strike. He does block. That's a suspect move, I would think, because yeah, here he goes. Funktion's going to give Swift Strike, meaning Living Totem damage is going to hit first, which will kill the Clergyman. Not quite sure why Jolt just didn't take 2, at most 3, if Funktion gave him +1/+1 on the chin here, just to keep that Clergyman on the board. The only thing I can think is maybe he has Blessing the Fallen in hand, which is a constant card, which allows the troops that come into play to gain the Inspire keywords from those troops in the graveyard as well as on the board. So we'll see if that's what happens here. Jolt plays a third wild resource on his 4th turn. Here comes out the Nelebrin Skirmisher, which is a, 2/1 wild creature with a socket in it. It looks like Jolt has chosen to socket the creature with the Spell Shield gem, meaning it cannot be the direct target of any abilities. The Skirmisher, when it does deal damage to a champion, it gains a +1/+1 permanent counter on him, so that could be a menace out there if he starts to get some damage through with it. With having the Living Totem out there and Swift Strike, I would like to see that Function probably puts Steadfast on here just so he can use him to block. I know it's not probably the ideal play because he won't start getting damage in with him, but that would keep that Skirmisher at bay. Maybe he's looking over his Corpse Fly and trying to decide if he wants to play it first in the main phase or wait till second main phase. Jolt has 3 cards in hand. Yep, here goes Steadfast. Now Function can attack with it and leave it back to block the Skirmisher, because Skirmisher only has 1 defense, and with the Living Totem having Swift Strike, it would take it off the board. So I kind of like that play by Function. Not quite sure if he would think that's an ideal play, but something that I think he has to make here to keep the Skirmisher from growing up and becoming way too big for him. Because with having that ability of Spell Shield on me, Function would not be able to murder him off the board. The only way you could take him off the board would be a board wipe of Extinction, because it doesn't target any creature individually. Moving to turn 5, Inner Conflict. Yep, exactly. Function's going to play a Stone Skin. Stone Skin allows him to interrupt any ability that's targeting him or a troop he controls. Inner Conflict was going to keep Living Totem from being able to block or attack. So Function makes sure that doesn't happen and leaves his Living Totem as is and operable. That did cost Jolt 3 resources of the 4 he has. He didn't make a drop on turn 5. So Jolt hoping he's going to be stalling out here with his resources. Wild decks are notorious for playing bigger creatures, bigger troops that cost several resources, up in the range of 5 and 6 resources. So stalling out on the resource drop could be difficult and may prove to be a problem for him later on in the game. Moving to Function's 5th turn. As we've seen with Function's previous games, he tends to hit all of his resource drops. That lights up his champion power, which he uses immediately to pay 2 health and draw a card. Picks up a Murder, which is not ideal against the Skirmisher, because he can't target it with the Spell Shield ability. Function will choose to swing with the totem here. Maybe choosing to put another keyword on or pump him up +1/+1. As he goes unblocked. He does not, just goes and put the 2 damage through and puts a... So I'm going to think he's going to put the Corpse Fly on the board now. Yep, here he goes. He's going to put the Corpse Fly on the board and go ahead and take one of those 3 cards out of Jolt's hand. Again, when the Giant Corpse Fly enters play, each opposing champion must discard a card of their choosing. So Jolt's going to choose which of his 3 cards he wishes to discard to the graveyard. In the meantime, I think Function's trying to figure out what he's going to do about that Skirmisher on board. Yes, it looks like Jolt discarded another Shield Trainer. It wouldn't have done him much good, because you can't give Steadfast twice. So it's not a bad discard there. I don't disagree with that. The Shield Trainer would have come with Steadfast on his own, but 2/2 with Steadfast doesn't do you any good against the Living Totem with Swift Strike. There's the Blessing the Fallen. Okay. So, for those of you who have been following the alpha, that used to be a broken card, and I still think it may be semi-broken here, but it seems to be working to an extent. So any troop that comes into play now should pick up the +1/+1 ability of the Protectorate Clergyman who's in the graveyard of Joltenergy. So now we can see why Jolt was willing to sacrifice that card earlier, as he goes to pass his turn, his 6th turn back over to Function. Again, he missed a resource drop, so he's kind of stalling over there. Function will hit his, and we'll be interested to see if he goes ahead and keeps trying to pull those cards out of Jolt's hands since he can't play them, instead of waiting on Jolt to gain the resources to play them. And yep, he keeps looking back at his Corpse Fly. I'm probably thinking the same thing. The one thing that could take the Living Totem off the board would be a Repel. but that costs 2 resources. So Giant Corpse Fly comes into play. Jolt must choose another card to put in the graveyard, which will bring him down to 1 card in hand. He chooses the Fist of Brigadon. It's a 6-drop wild creature that costs 6 threshold, which Jolt with 4 resources, only 3 wild threshold. That he's going to be a long way away from playing it, so I can't disagree with the discard there. A little disheartening because that's a large part of a winning condition for the wild decks. So Function chooses to swing with the Living Totem, no blockers, gives a +1/+1, so it's now a 3/3. Also swings with the Corpse Fly that hit the board last turn. So he will deal 5 damage to Joltenergy, bringing the life totals down to 16 for Jolt and 14 for Function. As he passes turn back over, start of turn 7 for Jolt. Jolt's going to need something to keep the Living Totem at bay. Honeycap will come as a 4/4. Honeycap is a 4-drop troop that starts out at 0/0 but gets +1/+1 as it comes into play with the number of wild threshold you have. So Jolt had 3 wild threshold, making a 3/3. It picked up the +1/+1 out of the Clergyman from the graveyard using Blessing the Fallen's ability, so it's now a 4/4. You have to think that's going to be a target of the murder for Function that he's been hanging on to here. That's really the only threat, as both Corpse Flies are flying. Jolt doesn't have any flying creatures back. Function hits his 7th resource drop on turn 7. 100% resource drops here. As he drops a diamond shard, giving him 4 blood threshold and 3 diamond threshold. Function's going to swing the house for 7 damage, at least. I would like to see him hit at the 8th damage by giving Living Totem +1/+1 here, bringing Jolt down to 8, because he has the shard in hand that will give him 8 resources next turn. He can end the game with Life Siphon. But he chooses not to. Interesting play here. He could have all but ended the game unless Jolt had a Stone Skin in hand for that 1 card or top decked it. Instead, he brings Jolt down to 9 health instead of 8. I'm guessing Function will probably play the Relentless Corruption instead. I would have thought with the board presence he has, they would have went ahead and tried to end the game there, because he could have put +1/+1 on a Living Totem when no one blocked, making him 4/4, dealing 8 damage, bringing Jolt down to 8. Could have swung first turn, gave Living Totem flying, and done 8 damage right off the top. If he killed one of them, done the Life Siphon and ended the game there. So instead, he elects to deal 7 damage, plays Relentless Corruption in his second main phase, which allows him to pull 1 card from Jolt's deck. It's a Honeycap, which is useless. As I said before, it comes in with +1/+1 equal to the number of wild threshold you have. Function has 0 wild threshold, so it's a useless card in hand. Joltenergy's 8th turn, no resource drop again. Plays the Wild Root Dancer. Comes in as a 3/3, gaining the ability from the Clergyman in the graveyard. Steadfast from the Shield Trainer. And let's see if Jolt swings here, trying to bait the Living Totem. He doesn't. He's got 1 card in hand. I can't see that being anything of significance. Function's going to get the Wild Root Dancer off the board just in case by playing the Murder. So we now have 3-on-3 in the terms of troops. 2 flying for Function, so they can't be blocked at this point in time, dealing 4 damage. You can give the Living Totem flying, which will be a 3/3 with flying, dealing 3 more damage. This turn should be it. So either way, he did end up getting the damage for the next turn. I would have probably played it a little differently, but each way it would have worked. So no fault to Function here. He's obviously playing well because he's hasn't lost a match yet. And he won't lose this one, I would imagine. He's going to swing for 7 damage here, all flying, so they can't be blocked, bringing Jolt down to 2 health. With a Life Siphon in hand, this game is over. Unless that 1 card for Jolt is a Stone Skin, which is why Function only used the Life Siphon for 2 instead of for all 5. That would be a little overkill. No answer, so Function takes game 1. That was a relatively smooth matchup for Function. It looked like that Jolt may have stalled out a little bit, so he wasn't able to get any of the big creatures out. We saw him discard the Fist of Brigadon. So we will wait here for a few moments as the challengers and players sideboard here. And we'll go ahead and take a look at that living totem we were talking about during the game there. As you can see in the bottom right-hand corner, bottom left-hand corner of your screen, I'm sorry. That's a 2/2 troop for 2 resources and 1 diamond threshold. As also you can see function sideboarding here. The abilities at the bottom, you can use these anytime as quick actions. So you can use them after they've declared their defenders, which makes it a very, very difficult card to deal with. Each of the abilities at the bottom cost 3 resources to play, and you can play them as many times as you want. Although 4 of them are keywords, and you don't want to double stack on those because it doesn't do any good. But the +1/+1 buff you can stack. So as we go through them, you can give the +1/+1 permanently. That is a permanent ability, meaning if it's bounced for whatever reason, it will come back into play with that +1/+1 counter on it. Steadfast, which we talked about, allows it to, Swift, we'll go down in order here. Swift Strike, which allows it to attack without exhausting, which is what we saw Function use it for there in that case. The second ability is Flight, which obviously can't be blocked by anything else that isn't flying. Life Drain, which allows it to deal damage, and any damage it deals, the controlling champion gets it back in form of health. So let's say he swings with it as a 2/2, deals 2 damage. He will also receive 2 health in return. And the last ability is Steadfast, which we also saw Function use in Game 1, which allows it to attack without exhausting. So, and I believe I messed up on the Swift Strike ability, so we'll go back and cover that real quick. Swift Strike, again, as we saw it used in Game 1, its damage will go through before any opposing damage goes through. So if a troop chooses to block the living totem's 2 damage will be dealt first before the opposing troop. So it looks like they are closing up on their sideboarding now as we look forward to Game 2 here between Function and Joltenergy. We'll see if Joltenergy has the ability to maybe balance his deck a little more or have a little bit better luck with the way the resource drops went his way, or didn't go his way, I should say. Because it looked like he stalled out. Most wild decks have a trouble when they stall out dealing much damage because they rely on the bigger creatures for their win condition. So it looks like the tournament director has received the sideboards. So we're about ready to go to the coin flip here. Here we go. And this time it looks like Function won the coin flip. He has a pretty good starting hand again. He's got 1 blood shard, 2 diamond shards, stone skin, giant corpse fly, living totem, pretty much the same exact hand, but this time he's got Spirit Cliff Cloud Knight in his hand, which is also a good keep hand because it does have the 2 diamond shards to meet the threshold. So we'll see Function keep his. Jolt will look over his 7 cards to start. Joltenergy chooses to keep his, so maybe he has a little bit better curve this time. So Function will start out the game without drawing because he is on the play, and plays a diamond shard. And pass turn over to Jolt. That 1 diamond shard does give Stone Skin in hand, which really I wouldn't see him using on turn 1, but that ability is there. Jolt will play a diamond shard first, which is interesting. If you're playing the same composition of deck, you want to get your wild shards out first because you need a lot of those threshold to be able to do a lot of, or play a lot of the cards in hand. Pass the turn back over to Function. Function turn 2 plays a blood shard and a living totem on the board. It's almost identical to what he did the first time around. So we'll see if it ends up with the same result as the first game, which if you're joining us just now, Function took Game 1. We are in Game 2 of the best of 3 matchup on Day 3 of the North America West pool of the second Hex Streamers tournament, brought to you by Hex TCG Pro and Hexcasters. Joltenergy plays a second diamond shard and passes turn over, which could be a problem if Function gets rolling here. Function plays the second diamond shard, which gives him the second diamond threshold, swings the living totem. Be interesting to see if he buffs the totem or waits to play the Cloud Knight on the second main phase. I would probably wait and play the Cloud Knight to put more pressure on, because it is a flying troop, and it does give life drain. It looks like Function may be doing the same thing here, because it would be hard pressed to believe that Jolt's going to have anything else but a Cloud Knight to be able to counter that this early in the game with the deck we saw earlier in Game 1. We didn't see a Cloud Knight from Jolt, but maybe he sideboarded that in response. We'll find out. In the meantime, Function puts 2 damage through and puts the Cloud Knight in on second main phase. Jolt does not... Oh, this is not good. Jolt is not able to drop a resource on turn 2. Instead, has to discard a card because the rules of Hex state that unless you have a card that states otherwise, you cannot end your turn with more than 7 cards at hand. So he discards Blessing the Fallen, passes turn back over to Function. Function plays a Blood Shard, triggers his champion ability to pay 2 health and draw a card. Now has 2 Stone Skin in hand, so we're looking at a Corpse Fly, a Murder, 2 Stone Skins, and a Blood Shard, so he can control whatever Jolt plays here. This is going downhill in a hurry for Jolt, as Function swings 5 at Jolt, 3 of it with life drain. Functions go ahead and pump up the living totem to a 3/3 now, so 6 damage going through, bringing Jolt down to 12. 3 health coming back to Function from the life drain ability, the Cloud Knight. So it's 21 Function, 12 for Joltenergy. 6 damage sitting on board for Function, nothing from Jolt. Jolt draws here and is hoping for the best. Jolt does not play another resource in his main phase. The only thing that could be of any value to Jolt, whatever, would be if he pulled Repel here, because he should have been able to repel him last turn. Didn't play anything. He has to discard again. Discards Spirit Dance, which is a 5-drop wild card, which gives any troops in your deck +2/+2 permanently, and their cost a -2. So that's a big card if you can land it. Move back over to Function. Function hits his 5th resource drop. And it looks like we had a little bit of a technical difficulty there. 5th resource drop is a Blood Shard. Pumps up the totem to a 4/4 and swings 7 at Jolt. There is that repel we were expecting, and Function with 2 Stone Skins will use one of them on the repel. So the 7 damage will no doubt go through now. Bringing Jolt down to 5 and basically putting Jolt in check for all you chess fans. Without a response, the game would be over next turn. Especially with Function's hand back, he can force Jolt to discard a card, he can interrupt an ability with Stone Skin, he can murder any opposing troop that hits the board. Function's all got this wrapped up. Jolt just could not get going in either game in this matchup. And yep, it looks like Jolt's going to go ahead and concede here because he has no response. So Function takes that one quickly and takes the match 2 games to nothing, making his match total undefeated. And it looks like his deck is proving to be difficult for any opponent thus far. As we take a look at that Spearcliff Cloud Knight that hit... Actually, we'll take a look at the Stone Skin instead. The Stone Skin proved to be a menace of a card. And as we take a look at Stone Skin there on your screen. Sorry, it took me a second to get that up there for you. Stone Skin, again, is a single drop quick action that allows you to interrupt any target action that is targeting you or a troop you control. Now, the few cards that can get away with around the Stone Skin are anything that's targeting a card on the chain, like a counter magic, which actually right now during the alpha is bugged, so Stone Skin can counter that, but that is against the tournament rules for this Streamers tournament. The other cards that can go through are something like an Extinction, which doesn't target, it's a board wipe. It affects all cards on board, or like a Heat Wave or Evolve. Any card that targets all the cards on board rather than just a single target, Stone Skin can't counter. So otherwise, it's a very good counter card for only costing one resource. So we saw that be a huge card for Function. As we pretty much wrap up our Day 3 coverage of the North American West Pool here in the second Hex Streamers tournament, brought to you by Hex TCG Pro and Hexcasters. So I'd like to thank you again for tuning in. Check in next time as we cover Day 4 coverage of the tournament. Until then, we'd like to ask that you check out the Hexcasters YouTube page at www.youtube.com/user/hexcasters. Actually, I'll go ahead and put a link down here below my stream. So go ahead and click on that link and make sure you subscribe to the Hexcasters channel. Please subscribe to mine while you're at it, as well as my Twitter. Go ahead and follow that. And until then, we'll see you next time. Thank you again for tuning in for Shardcast.